Hi viewers, welcome to Tobago Chronicles. This is part 7 of this series, and as you would have seen in previous programs, we are looking at the heroes, the legends, and the contribution they made to Trinidad and Tobago's development in post-independent Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, we also have a second segment, and this segment focuses on Push, saluting Push. And our host, Anne-Marie, will bring you another important segment this evening. But in the first show, the first segment we go to now, we will have some elements of the contribution of people like Bertil Sinclair, Eastland Mackenzie, and other heroes in sport. So let's take in episode 7 of Tobago Chronicles. A.N.R. Robinson was carrying on the operations of the Tobago House of Assembly from 1981 to 86, when he was plucked from his Tobago desk in Scarborough to take charge of the country as leader of the NAR, a coalition of parties that ended the run of PNM dominance in Trinidad and Tobago. Robinson had reached a place where no Tobagonian had achieved when he was sworn in as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in December 1986.
I, Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, and will uphold the Constitution and the law, that I will conscientiously, impartially, and to the best of my ability discharge my duties as Prime Minister, and do right to all manner of people without fear or favor, affection, or ill will.
Also being sworn in the cabinet, the NAR cabinet of the day, was the first Tobago member of parliament, female personality by the name of Pam Nicholson.
Do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, and will uphold the Constitution and the law, that I will conscientiously, impartially, and to the best of my ability discharge my duties as a minister, and do right to all manner of people without fear or favor, affection, or ill will.
Pam Nicholson and A.N.R. Robinson were the two Tobago members of a cabinet that Robinson would lead for a 5-year period. On the other side, the vanquished PNM was now led by the relatively youthful Patrick Manning, who himself sought to include Tobago talent within his parliamentary team. He turned to a Mason Hall boy, Dr. Keith Rowley, then a well-recognized seismologist, to serve as one of his 6 senators. Dr. Keith Rowley, a scholar from Mason Hall, was chosen by the PNM new political leader, alongside Com Imber, Kenneth Valley, and other notables who themselves went on to fulfill ministerial portfolios in subsequent administrations. By the time Trinidad and Tobago commemorated its 25th anniversary of independence, Tobago's sons had contributed massively to the progress of the former colony. PNM administrations were well served by the Tobago intellect and scrupulous conduct of more than a dozen leaders of various arms of the public and state sector. The national policy framework was thoroughly defined during the Eric Williams era, 1962 to 81, with inputs by these distinguished Tobago sons and others from the larger island in the Union. The new Prime Minister, George Chambers, continued with minor policy reforms on the earlier work of the architects of public sector management during his term from 1981 to 86. An important point to note is that as Mr. Chambers took office, some of the old vanguard were no longer identified in his entity, particularly Mr. Richard Tobey, who was an erstwhile colleague of Dr. Eric Williams as his personal advisor and also the head of the newly formed National Petroleum Company in 1972. Mr. Tobey held several positions in the Williams administration until 1981. The nation's silver anniversary came when Tobago artistic talents had already left an indelible mark on Best Village competitions, Trinidad and Tobago Music Festival, and Calypso competitions. The key actors in the events convinced skeptics within the country that Tobago brought something to the cultural arena that enriched our national cultural offerings. The earliest example of this was the country's showcase of its rich cultural offering at Carifesta in 1972, in 1976, in 1979, and in 1981. As a matter of fact, the first Carifesta in 1972, which was held in Guyana, had no Tobago resident within the cultural delegation. But by 1981, the fourth Carifesta, Tobago participation included persons who were resident in the island of Tobago at the time.
It was, however, via the means of TV that another aspect of Tobago's dramatic skills came to the fore with the launch of Turn of the Tide series in 1983. And this brought to the fore the significant talents of one Eastlyn Bacchus, who played the lead role in Turn of the Tide, alongside Rodel Pagi Clark. Directed and produced by Horace Wilson, the Turn of the Tide series was one of the biggest drawing cards on the island's sole television station in that period. And this therefore allowed the characters in the play to receive so much kudos from the national community, who were actually helping to live their lives even off the set.
Everybody in the village to laugh at you and me. Ma, all I'm asking...
All I is saying is no. N-O, no.
Woman, what kind of noise are you making this early morning?
All I was
Keep me out
asking...
of this. And if you pick up any insect, you better go and see about yourself.
Like you forget who house this is? Now, why are they trying to keep me out?
Keep your mouth out of me and my daughter's business.
It's my grandchild, and it's my house. So anything that happens under this roof is my business.
I tell you, anything that have to do with me and my children, keep yourself.
Under Pinky Alum, we had our drama group also. Louis Villain, myself, Jackie Dillon, all of us were in that drama group, and there is where she actually did the casting for Turn of the Tide. When Horace Wilson was ready for people, he actually asked Bernadette Pinky Alum to assist in casting. And so we had Jackie Dillon, Handel Dillon, Gilbert O'Connor, myself, Paggy, and all these people, Georgia McFarlane, Jerry McFarlane, all those people, Linda Dick, Mrs. Graves' son, Mrs. Yates' son, all of us, you know the Turn of the Tide cast.
I remember the cast.
But before that, we had been doing Play of the Month under Horace James. And Horace James used to come to Tobago and film Play of the Month, Kenneth Bob. Maybe don't forget Kenneth.
Yes.
And so Horace used to write some of the plays. We did Invocation, we did Back Bay, we did Return to Back Bay, we did What the Moon Saw. We did all of those before Turn of the Tide.
I remember hearing about the Back Bay one.
Yeah, yes. Back Bay, Return to Back Bay, and so on. So we did a lot of these plays. And then when Horace came on the scene, we did Turn of the Tide, first so many episodes, and then they asked for more and asked for more until we did 13 episodes. And after that,
in the arena of Calypso, the contribution of Tobagonians in this first period, the first decade and the first quarter of nationhood was astonishing. This little island contributed immensely to the expansion of the Calypso art form. Firstly, with the performances of Lord Nelson, followed by recordings, multiple recordings of Calypso Rose, who became the Queen of Calypso. Alongside these persons, Rose and Shadow. And a little after, Tobago Crusoe was also an important exponent of the art form. Social commentary, political commentary, he was quite at ease, and he was both writer and singer. He sung his way into the hearts of the judges in 1983 to win the National Calypso Monarch title.
Every session, just like in the 30s, is causing a concern internationally. Yes, worldwide recession on world economy is a reason for alarm by economy. Lesser countries catching their tail to catch their tail over water. Bigger countries who want to fail, but they can't make it no better. Rainy days are here at last, things begin to get hard. What is the position in Trinidad? We have oil in a quantity, plenty money. We even have a high standard of living also. Man, the way things were really going well, I myself was even saying this is the land where milk and honey flow. Government playing with billions, citizens playing with millions, more cash in the place than the law allows. Well, now that the rainy days are here, I don't see why we didn't prepare Trinidad. Have no right to be balling now.
Ladies and gentlemen, the always consistent and totally likable Othniel Bacchus from Calypso, Tobago, 1983 Monarch, and the taste of Don't Cry.
In the arena of Pan, Tobago Steel Bands moved up another notch, winning the Panorama competition, which had been restructured some years earlier. The Tobago TNTech East Side was able to make it all the way to the national finals of Panorama, playing a De Fosto song in 1986. That was a historic first for Tobago Steel Band.
I was associated with East Side, formerly East Side, and afterwards it was called TNTech East Side, from its inception in 1966 until 1987. During the 80s, the early 80s, the size of the band was between 45 and 50 players. Until 1985, we had about 55 persons. And we made it to the semi-finals in Port Spain. In 1985, however, I continued my training at Roxborough Secondary School and with students from other schools in Tobago, and took a group of about 35 students to the school's music festival in Trinidad. And in 1986, I took all those children to the Panorama with the band, and we had about 80 to 85 persons in the Panorama in 1986. The members liked the first tone music. I remember in 1982 we played a tune called Rattlesnake. We came second in Tobago. And somehow the membership of the band liked the first tone music. I cannot tell you who actually selected Lego in '86, but we selected Lego. Whether it was the arranger, Mr. Wade, or whether it was the membership. I can't remember who actually selected the tune. The size of the band is one. We had more players and more skill, and I told you I trained 35 people. And the size of the band, we had more skilled players and more skilled players. And then I had two good friends from the West who teamed up with us. Delbert Henry and Desmond Graham. You know Desmond Graham. So Desmond Graham and Delbert Henry were with us. You know. We introduced dynamics into the arrangement. A lot of new things. We put in other new things in the arrangement that we previously didn't do. In those days, the front line, we had 15 tenors. And background was heavy. We had 10 guitar pans. And the basses, we had 9 6-set basses and 6 tenor basses. Well, everybody was happy, and there was support in the preparation, like getting the stands properly repaired and getting the instrument, the pans painted, and there was lots of cooperation. When the band came off stage in Spain, we were surprised. He met us there. He was there listening. And when the band came off and we stationed the bands in an area, he joined us. I mean, when I say I mean Mr. Robinson, he was in Spain at the Panorama, and when the band came off stage, he joined us. And because of that achievement, he invited me into his office one day and questioned me as to what he can do to assist. And that site where the band theater is right now, we were given that site in that meeting, where the band theater is right now.
It was clear by 1987 that any inclusion of Tobago's cultural exponents were well-deserving and not because of tokenism. This respect was accelerated when the Tobago Liberator occupied Prime Minister's office at Whitehall.
Notwithstanding the high energy and commitment that Robinson and his bureaucrats exhibited in that first term, Tobagonian intellect, expertise, and skills continued to shape national progress over the waters. Robert York had become a leading industrialist, employing scores of skilled and semi-skilled persons at his expanding metal fabrication plant in O'Meara, Arima.
1972, when the company pulled out of the Caribbean, Bob started York Structures Limited with just 10 employees. Under his prudent and responsible leadership, it developed into the premier structural engineering and steel fabricating company in the Caribbean region, specializing in design, fabrication, and erection of structural steelwork for apartment buildings, office complexes, airports, university campuses, and petrochemical plants, employing in excess of 400 persons. Robert York has quietly, without fanfare, contributed to the development of the engineering industry and has received numerous awards, which include the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago's highest award, a Career of Excellence. He was awarded the Service Award from the Institution of Structural Engineers and the People's Choice Award by the Institute of Structural Engineers in the UK.
York Structures Limited was birthed in the 1970s and grew from strength to strength, making emphatic contributions to the landscape and architecture of Trinidad and Tobago across fields including the energy sector.
Dr. York is committed to the development of further education, and several students have been afforded scholarships, not only in engineering, but also in different fields at local, regional, and foreign universities. Over the last 15 years, his company has donated 2 prizes annually to the Faculty of Engineering. He has also contributed to the building, restoration, or repair works to churches, schools, and private residences. He supports several charities and has also served as property advisor to the Anglican Diocese of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Robert York has devoted most of his life to building an internationally recognized high level of competence in the structural engineering industry. He has been instrumental in the development of the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago as a result of his company's deep involvement in the construction of the methanol, urea, ammonia, steel, iron carbide, and liquefied gas plants in the country. In 1985, Robert York purchased the Mount Irving Bay Hotel and Golf Course from the then Malaysian owners. This was notable as he was the first Tobagonian to purchase a hotel of that size. It was remarkable that he was able to buy the very estate that he himself had been forbidden to enter as a young boy and return to the area where he grew up in humble surroundings.
Bruce was still the stalwart directed monetary policy as the economic boom subsided in the mid-1980s. In fact, his term spanned 15 years from 1969 to 84. The central bank placed special emphasis on widening the network of commercial bank branches and building institutions in the capital market segment of the financial system. This in an effort to allow for the diversification of savings. Under Mr. Bruce's direction, the bank played an important role in the formation of the stock exchange that we use today, the unit trust corporations, and the Home Mortgage Bank, all significant institutions in our system up to the current time. Other Tobago sons and daughters played prominent roles during Robinson's leadership of Trinidad and Tobago. Henry Seeley, the Mongrace boy, was the dynamo in the growth and development of an investment culture via the vehicle formed during the time Victor Bruce was held responsible for the central bank. It was his 11-year service in the Unit Trust Corporation that really caused an increase in the number of account holders in the unit trust to triple during his period of service, and a time in which he offered more than 4 types of mutual instruments, including the Shakonia Fund, which became a US denominated instrument that was very well subscribed. In this same period, the former bodybuilding star, Michael Hercules, had risen through the ranks of the prison services and eventually impressed his peers, colleagues, and inmates in the nation's prison as he took the responsibility as prison commissioner from February 1986 until his untimely demise in August 1993. It has been said that Hercules was a staunch advocate of prisoner rehabilitation. He often organized programs to enrich the lives of inmates and maintained an open door policy with staff throughout his tenure as commissioner. It is also acknowledged that under Hercules' watch, the Prison Officers Association gave birth.
The YouthBuild program, Tobago's own generic national youth service program that took Tobago by storm and made waves and impacted the lives of many young persons in Tobago. We've been chatting so far with participants in the program who have benefited from YouthBuild. Today we have with us Mr. Dexter Brooks, a staff member who was part of engineering the activities of the program so that it has the desired impact and achieve the goals of the program. Mr. Brooks, welcome to Tobago Chronicles.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
All right. So the kind of commitment that we saw back then from persons who worked along with the program was indeed unique, rare, some may say. Yeah. So tell us from your perspective, what were the core objective or the goals, the mission? I understand there's a nice catchphrase that the YouthBuild program use. Tell us about
the
that.
YouthBuild program, and thank you for having me, it's more or less to shape lives and so on, because we have people from varying background, and we want to ensure that we place people into a position where they can present themselves towards greater employment. Right. But most of all, the orientation is where we place a lot of emphasis on.
Okay.
Right? Because, of course, at the interview stage, you find people come, they don't know how to say morning, for simple things like right. that and so on. And after they got selected, mind you, we do what you call a 10 days living in orientation, okay. rigorous, right? Training people in to say thanks, simple things like that, mannerism, etiquette, and so on. So we brought the different people in to reorganize, because the aim of the program is to prepare them for the world of work.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a kind of unfreezing them from yes. What they were yes. accustomed to.
That's right.
So that you can now impact their lives meaningfully. Okay, so the orientation you said was about 10 days yeah. and it was a living situation.
That's right.
Maybe just, I know you experienced several cycles of young persons. What stood out for you in that orientation period? How were you able to determine that you were in fact making the impact that you did on the young person?
Boy, let's go back to the interview. When we see some of these people come and you ask them certain questions, then of course you know you have a lot of reshaping to do.
Right.
After they were successful and during that orientation, you see the change. People start getting into the program. They want to volunteer in different areas or different aspects of the program. Mind you, it wasn't an easy task. right? It wasn't an easy task because the mantra, by the way, I was a community service officer, and what we were saying, we administer the medicine, voluntarism, and hope that, you know, it pass on and so on. And when we see young people, the change, the behavioral pattern of young people, it brings that joy. You want to go the extra mile in terms of, you know, the continuation of the program and so on. And then, of course, when you, in several of the programs, you hear the young people speak, what the YouthBuild would have done for them, then you would see the difference. I remember there was a situation, we take them to Monks in George, and there was a particular program that was going up at Monks in George, still going on. And the behavior from the student from that particular program, and the young people said, so, yeah, what's going on? In other words, they were shocked because it doesn't happen within the YouthBuild program and so on. So that's the level of discipline that we engender in the program.
Okay, so on average, most of the cycles you would have had maybe about 40 to 60 young persons in the program. Quite a number. How many staff you would have had? You were the community liaison persons. What kind of other staffing you had in the program?
What we do for every cycle, we pick up from amongst them, call them team leaders. And so on, which help to bridge the gap, male-female ratio, that kind of stuff and so on. And then you have the office staff, you have the person deal with education and so on. So we have in all the areas and so on. We have about 5 or so at the in-house at Bell Garden and so on to manage the thing and so on.
Okay, so just give us a picture. You would have had the screening first and the selection process. Then they went into the 10-day orientation. What followed?
All right. After that, we put them up because the program geared for the whole of work. So for example, we have some of them involved in library. Now, in some of the schools, they have a lot of books. And we did some training so that they were managing those libraries and so on in the various schools and so on.
Okay, so you placed them at particular areas. And were these areas that persons were paid for or they volunteered?
They volunteered. And they get their stipend.
And you got people to happily volunteer for things
Some
like
were doing the agricultural program in the different school. As a matter of fact, way up to Castara. Because you know, most of the school, primary school, they have the beds and so on, agricultural plots and so on, but nobody to really organize them. Our students in the YouthBuild, they take up that mantle and that kind of stuff and so on. In term, because you have to get what you call points to graduate in terms of your community service areas.
Okay, so there was something that was driving them then, a reward that they have to look forward to.
That's the thing and so on. Of course, you know, they have to do some cleaning and so on. Some of the ladies come with their long nails and so on. They get down with their cutlass and so on and clean the area and all that kind of stuff and so on. So it's quite rewarding for me, I must say.
Okay, so were there any challenges that you would have experienced? Because I'm certain with all programs there are the challenges. With a student population, with young persons being in a living environment and then working basically voluntarily, what were some of those things you had to surmount?
Of course, there were some challenges. I remember there was one guy from Belgium, we have to suspend him from the program because, you know, deviant behavior and that kind of stuff and so on. We have to suspend. Of course, you know, when they don't get the stipend on time, you know, that would thing. But generally, and I want to be quite frank, generally, it was more or less like a pressure group. So people want to stay, they want to graduate. Because one of the things, we ensure that we do placement at the end of each cycle. We do placement. So when you graduate, you know exactly where you'll be going and so on.
Okay, what was involved in you obtaining, or the organization obtaining, these placements for young persons? Was it as easy as you make it out to?
Well, of course, you know, our leader, Mr. Phillips, who have all that kind of influence, because in life, if you don't have influence, you know, it makes it a little difficult. But bear in mind, the success of the program, even at the graduation level, you would find people would be calling, hey, I would like to get so and so, please send, you know, that kind of stuff and so on. So it makes it a little easier, because over a period of time, when you see the success rate of the program, then of course, business places will be calling to get people involved and that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I was on secondment to the program from community development.
Okay.
And they said I want to do a little night something at Hilton back then. And when I went to the guy, he said, but we heard about you. We want to get you, and I didn't do an interview. We want to get you to talk to deal with the young people, the staff. And I was hired in the night to in charge of the stewarding program and so on. So that's the depth of the program in terms of the selling of the program, because of the young people, the way in which they carry about themselves and so on. And then of course it was a talking point in Tobago about the YouthBuild program, the success rate of it and so on. Because the young people do their drama and all that kind of stuff, depicting what YouthBuild. Of course, they would have mocked you in their drama and so on, but of course, they would indicate what the YouthBuild program have done for them and so on.
Okay, so you indicated just now that you were on secondment from the community development department. Tell me a little bit about that, because that seems to speak towards a public kind of, private kind of partnership with government and the non-governmental sector.
At that time, Miss Carrington was the administrator and so on, and she endorsed the program along with the chief secretary and so on. So they more or less endorsed the program and, you know, of course, get the funding towards the program and so on, because of course, you know, when you see what's happening with our young people, the which way they express themselves and so on, there was no help but to contribute to the program, I must say, because of the fact that, and of course, even at our graduation, you would often hear the student mention what the program would have done for them as of today. Well, that time when they were there and so on, because of course, people come in with rough edges, as we would say.
Right.
But you know, you get them to adapt, to communicate, and that sort of a stuff and so on. Because even in terms of swimming, some of them, most of them couldn't swim, but they leave there, they learn to swim, and all this sort of a stuff. Outside of the orientation, we take them to Trinidad, places of interest for another 10 days. Again, visiting the military museum. While Full Trust, and get interview with all some of the ministers and that kind of stuff and so on. So that really helped to give them that extra push for today.
So, Mr. Brooks, I understand that the program had the unfreezing element, and then you were beginning to build the character of individuals by exposing them, as you said, the trips to Trinidad, understanding their heritage and who they are, so that you can create an identity for them. Tell me about it, whether this program was mixed, whether it was males only, females only, and maybe how it might have impacted differently on both sides.
On both sides, the ratio was slightly balanced. You know, because most of these programs, you would have more female, but for the YouthBuild program, it's slightly balanced, you know. As a matter of fact, at our interview level, so many people come, male, female, that kind of, so it's slightly balanced in terms of the ratio and so on.
Okay. I'm interested to understand what were the things that you would say was more successful about YouthBuild program, because as we're aware, we heard from previous persons that at one point in time, of course, the program is no more. But what were the things that you think were most successful in being able to transition the lives of the young persons involved in the program? Discipline. Tell me about that.
The level of discipline, because of course, you know, in any organization, you have to have rules and so on. And even, for example, myself as a team leader, I ensure that I get there on time. So when you're talking discipline, when you're talking punctuality, you have to be there. So I live Scarborough, but I make sure that I get to Bell Garden relatively early. And then we, of course, we have worship. Start of any given day program and so on, because the key in anything you do, worship, because there's a creator, there's somebody who is over us, and we need to acknowledge our creator. So worship is very important. We teach people decorum, how you dress and that kind of stuff and so on. We even have ballroom dancing, which is a level of discipline, because if you know how you operate and that kind of stuff and so on. So for me, the level of discipline speaks volume, and that gives, because you know sometimes you really want to give up, but when you see the response from the participants, you know that you're going somewhere and so on. So for me, that gives me that extra drive to go for the level of discipline
Okay, so do you see any relevance in a program such as YouthBuild in the Tobago community today?
Most definitely. Most definitely, because I spent probably about 6 years there. As a matter of fact, I was in a program similar to YouthBuild called National Training Service with the same Mr. Phillips, and that's where we take the cue from and so on when we work that program. But the YouthBuild, we had add more to it and so on. Now more than ever, voluntarism, but of course, you know, they get a little stipend, which a little reward. But voluntarism, because if you're in a space, therefore you must contribute towards the development of the island and so on. So I am saying quite relevant. The YouthBuild program, be it whatever national service, it's quite relevant for today. In terms of getting our young people ready, prepare them as to how, and one of the things, let me just go back, that we used to do, prepare them how to do resume and so on. We prepare because you want to apply for a job. And if you have some passes, you would try and get the other passes so that you prepare yourself for the whole out there and so on. So the program is quite relevant. The success rate of that program, as a matter of fact, as I traverse Tobago, see the young people, some I can't remember. They're working in different places and that kind of, some up at the museum, some in the hospital and the different sphere of life and so on. Some are into photography and so on.
Right, and that I'm sure brings a special kind of pride in the work that you would have done and so on. So tell me, on a personal level, we've talked about how it impacted the students, we've talked about the structure of the program, how it has impacted Tobago. How has YouthBuild changed you?
Well, and that's quite interesting, because may I remind you that when I was called for this program with Mr. Andre Phillips, he have an eye to pick people out like a hawk to see the good and so on. I must give him credit for that, you know, because while I like to stand up and talk before people and so on, I didn't think that, even though I grew up in church and we have Pathfinder and all this AY lead and so on, but that program was a program with a difference, which reshaped me, you see, helped me to see things different and to knock on doors. To knock on doors. Believe you me, because when you have to make contact, you have to call this person. There was a teacher in Moriah, you know, I have to liaise with her and so on. And she was a little hard to get through to. But that teacher became my good friend. And there are several, Dr. Bob and all these people and so on. So the program helped me to develop, to see the full potential in me and so on. And one of the things that I always say to people, Mr. Phillips always talk about paper trail. So I learned that now I'm working at the department there and so on, so I have to follow that paper trail. Send me to do some little courses and all that kind of stuff and so on, because I don't know what tomorrow will bring and so on. So it helped me at a personal level to see the potential and that kind of stuff and so on.
Okay, great. So any final words you want to say to our listeners, our viewers, about the YouthBuild program, its impact, its history, what resonates with you?
When I look around today, given what is happening, I think the only thing that will save the nation is to reorganize the YouthBuild program to change life, to mold people, reshape their thinking, and so on. So I am saying to all of Tobago, bring back the YouthBuild program. I think it would really worth the while, because you say there's a saying, the eating is in the pudding. And if you do that, you would see we would have a better Trinidad and Tobago.
Well said. Couldn't say it any better. Thank you very much, with Mr. Brooks, for chatting with us today. You've been on the Tobago Chronicles.
You're most welcome.